half mile, right?
Okay.
And we have, if you see that map right there, that's the trail in the black line is the one that exists, which is all ADA compliant and accessible for anyone with a handicap. You'll see that extra mile in the dotted brown line at the bottom. We're planning to cut that. We just got a grant from Utah State Trailways to add a mile to our trail to have more walking trails for people. So we're gonna have that hopefully by the end of next summer. We're gonna use our youth crew. We have a youth organization every summer where we get high schoolers from the local area that work for us for about a month or more. And we're gonna have them come out and work and help us cut the trail next summer. We're thinking, right now we don't work, the National Wildlife Refuge System, every refuge is supposed to have what's called a Comprehensive Conservation Plan, or CCP. It is a huge 15-year plan of basically everything you want to do or have available on your refuge. We don't have one yet because we are working on a watershed project, which is the whole Bear River watershed. It's just getting started, but that goes through areas of Wyoming and Idaho, and then down here, everywhere the Bear River runs. And they're working on projects where they do easements, and they're working with private landowners where they still own the land, but we have the rights to help them management to keep it good for wildlife. And then they have other areas that they use for either agriculture or whatever, because it's really important these days to try to keep a lot of that land in agricultural or ranching, to not let it get developed. There's so little along the rivers these days. So because we're working on that large project, we have, our conservation project is gonna be, or our plan is probably gonna be a few more years before we have it written. Once a refuge has those, basically everything is set. Every trail, everything that you have has a sign on it of what you can and can't do on it, all of that. You'll notice a few of our trails don't say whether or not you can have dogs, bikes, etc. yet. We still have to make those decisions. So probably within the next 2 years, that will all be decided. It also always goes out for public comment, anything on refuge. We can decide what we want to do, but it always goes out to the public to give us their information, because basically it's your land, right? It's public land, it's federal land that taxpayers have paid for. So we want the public to tell us what they think of our plans, and if there's anything they really, really hate, you know, we might have to relook at what we're doing. So
Okay.
that big plan will make a big difference coming up.
All right, we found it.
Cool?
Yes. So, apparently what we need to focus on is on policy and planning.
Okay.
And I think that's kind of what you were just talking about a little
Yep,
bit.
CCPs, conservation, I said it wrong again, comprehensive conservation plans are
Okay.
probably the biggest tool for most refuges. And like I said, we have what's called an annual habitat management plan, and then a basic refuge plan. It's not as large as the other one, so we're working with those, and they're more like year to year instead of the next 15 years. But that will be coming. We have to have it done probably, I think, by the end of 2012 or so.
Okay. And the recent mandates through Fish and Wildlife Service requiring recreational use and viewing at the refuge.
Yep. This refuge itself is really good on that. It's, a lot of people don't realize, one, very basic, the difference between a refuge and a national park. U.S. Fish and Wildlife and a National Wildlife Refuge is always wildlife first. National parks are people first and recreation first. So recreation and visitor use on refuges is still sort of a new thing since the late 80s and early 90s. So we used to be way more, we're still very science oriented as an organization, but we used to be a lot more closed always for the wildlife. We've realized over the past that we can have, especially large refuges like Bear River, we've got almost 80,000 acres, or will have with all of our new tracks. That's a lot of land. There's plenty of space. If you look at this map here, just for example, all of this space is closed to the public all the time, basically. The only people that ever go out there are us, staff members, to check on water levels, wildlife surveys, etc. This area is the auto loop, which is open, and it's open to hunting during the hunting season. And this little area is open to hunting, like pheasant hunting, etc. over here. And that's 30% or under. That was what our management has always decided. With the size we have, about 30% is good to open for those uses. This area, when this building was built in 2006, was decided that it would be compatible, and with how much land we have that is closed to the public, that we can use this for environmental education. We have thousands and thousands of school kids, scout groups, visiting birding groups that stop here, use the facility, use our trail, go on birding tours in the summer that we take in our van. But all of that, again, was done once the environmental assessment was done on all of the land that we already own. Our management had to sit down with our visitor services manager and usually with our regional heads as well. We're in what's called Region 6, which is the Dakotas, Idaho, I'm gonna forget all the states. I think Colorado is where our offices are, the head offices. And they all sit together and decide what kind of public use we wanna allow. There's a lot of refuges that have none. I came from refuges out east in Massachusetts, very small and very suburban. You know, you've got almost houses all the way around your refuge. It might be just a pond, it might be a small forested area. They're a lot smaller and they're very suburban. Several of those are completely closed. It just doesn't work. There's an endangered species in there, a plant or animal, anything like that, or just, you know, certain plants that would be really susceptible if all of a sudden too many walkers or ATVs were going through there. It just wouldn't be very good. So a lot of those are completely closed. Every refuge has to decide with its management how they want to use public use, if at all. There are 6 main uses that we look into. I'm going to see if I can remember all of these. Hunting, fishing, wildlife photography, birding, hiking and walking, and I'm forgetting one. I'm not sure what it is. Environmental education, I think is the other one. Those are the 6 main public uses that Fish and Wildlife uses. We can have some or all, but what you try to do is if you're going to have some in an area, you want to try to get the same percentage so that every user group feels like they're being represented and has something that they can do on that refuge. It doesn't always work depending on the compatibility of your habitat, but that's what we try to do. We have hunting and fishing out on the far end along the canals and in the wetlands. We have places to walk for, and out here we have a huge amount of environmental education on this refuge with all the schools visits that we get. We visit a bunch of schools as well. So we have a photography contest that goes on every year, so our photographers can go out and enjoy the refuge and bring their pictures back and share them with us. So we pretty much here at this refuge, and it's pretty easy for us because we have such an amount of space to be able to do that. We have pretty much all of our public uses represented in some space or form.
Have you ever run into problems with the hunters and the birders? Like
I wouldn't say
this time
problems.
of year,
Yes,
they've got
there's always a few that seem to be on opposite ends of the issue, if you want to call it an issue. But we try to use environmental education to bring them closer to the middle. I'm an avid birder myself. That's what I do. But I also grew up hunting. I also, working for Fish and Wildlife, we use it as a management tool. If there were no hunting on this refuge, you would probably have huge flocks of Canada geese and much or smaller flocks of some of the birds that need a little bit more space, or smaller birds that can't fight for themselves as well as the larger birds. Some of those birds, as a management tool, it just really, really helps. It also helps with disease. People forget about that. If you have all your birds in one refuge, the more populated we get as well with suburban and urban areas. If wildlife has only certain small refuges to go to, right, disease spreads really, really quick. And then if you have any endangered species, it's much more likely to wipe them out quicker that way, or for them to get sick, than if they have a lot of refuges to move to. And if you're helping that species by keeping either predators or other larger species that might be taking their food and shelter away down, try to help keep the balance. A lot of people, are more into, leave nature alone, which is great, which is what we try to do if we can. But a lot of times we need to help out because we've already, as a human race, changed a lot of things in the first place. So.
Now, you mentioned predators.
Yep.
What type of predators do you have out to the refuge, and do you manage the predators?
We do. Very few, but we do. In many different ways. One of the not large in size, but biggest as in how much they eat and how detrimental they can be, is the California gull, the actual state bird. During the nesting season of other birds like avocets and terns and stilts, which are a lot of our priority species here on the refuge, California gulls eat thousands of eggs and will even eat the live chicks when they're small enough. So they're really, really voracious predators.
I didn't know they were a predator.
Yeah, big predator.
Wow.
A lot of refuges, now I don't know for sure if we do that here, but a lot of refuges will, if they're too close to certain areas where other birds of priority are nesting, they will just remove their eggs, try to like get them to nest elsewhere. Ours is we have created a whole bunch of small islands that the avocets like to nest on, away from the gull colony. The gulls like this big rocky island that they're on out there. So away from that, we have created a bunch of nice islands that our avocets and everything else like, so they're not as near. We keep the habitat burned on those islands because they like a little veg. They like to be able to see what's coming at all times. So we know what they like and we create habitat good for them away from the predators. We also have a lot of mammal predators. Fox, coyote, raccoon, skunk, those guys will all eat eggs and birds. Am I forgetting any? There's probably more that I'm not thinking of. But we don't manage those super, like, there's not a necessarily big plan for those, but our law enforcement is allowed, if they're in a nesting area, especially during nesting season, if they see a predator, they can lethally remove them. In the past, they've tried to, on many refuges, they've tried to trap them and remove them. Never works.
No.
They always come right back. So the
Yeah,
really
it's a
only
food
way is
source,
unfortunately to lethally remove them. We don't do that much here because again, we have such a huge amount of space, and right now the birds on our refuge, the numbers are really good. We have so much habitat for them. I'm sure they're getting predated, but in a percentage that right now we are having to do a lot of predator management.
It's
I
minimal.
worked out east on a small refuges where we had an endangered turtle. There were not many left, on the planet left, and they pretty much had to, in the area where there's turtles nest, any predator that comes in, bird, mammal, whatever, was taken out. We just couldn't have them there. It was one of those hard decisions. We didn't like doing it,
Right.
but you have to. That's part of Fish and Wildlife's job, is protecting endangered species. It's right up on the top of our list of what we do. And if we've got one that's endangered versus, let's say coyote, who is not even close to endangered,
Right.
they're doing just fine and don't have any problem moving into the suburbs. We need to remove them if they're getting rid of somebody that's endangered.
Now, as far as open areas that you said access for the normal visitor coming to the refuge, is there blinds out there for photography?
There is. We have one. It's a handicapped accessible hunting blind during hunting season. Anyone
Okay.
that's handicapped and their family can go and use that for hunting. So it's especially for that. But throughout the rest of the year, photographers can book it and use it during the day and take photography from there as well.
Okay.
We're also planning, hopefully within the next year or two, when this trail is finished, the new trail, to have a photography blind out there as well.
Okay. What portion of the refuge is open to public use?
I would say
And
between
even,
30 or 40%. I know just around 30% is open to hunting, and the only other additional portion to that is open to the public is this right here around the education center. So I'd say 35 to 40% is open to the public.
now, and this might be part of your 15-year plan, do you ever plan on, I know that some of the units are close to hunting and some are open, do you ever rotate those at all, or you
Right
keep
now
them?
we don't. It gets
same?
really confusing to do that, especially in this community where hunting has been on these wetlands. It's the reason the refuge is here, basically.
Right.
In the 20s, this is the only refuge ever created by law, because with the huge die-off during an avian botulism outbreak, the hunting community that lived here went to Congress and said, we need to save those wetlands. Can we do something? And they turned it into a refuge so they could help get rid of the botulism and manage the wetlands better and keep it the amazing place it is. So it's difficult. We have a really great hunting community here. At the same time, they really have a long legacy of hunting here, so they kind of know and want to hunt in the areas. What we do, though, a lot to help the hunting areas is We have unfortunately invasive species out there like Phragmites and salt cedar and a few others, is try to manage those in our hunting areas to keep them really good hunting areas. We do some years, like right now, little unit 1A where people hunt has been really dry. It's wet now, but it was dry earlier in the season because we tried to pull off a prescribed burn in there to get rid of some of that
Right.
Phragmites. So there are times at different years where we might have an area closed or lower water where it's not as good hunting because we are managing it to keep it good habitat the following years.
Right.
So-
I noticed last year, I think you had 2C was dry
Yep.
for the first part.
Yep.
And then.
And that
you
was
let
just
water in
natural.
there.
We had such a drought last summer
Right.
compared to this year where we're really wet. We had to decide where we needed to put water. And our priority is always for the birds, right?
Right.
Before the hunters, we always have to decide what's good for the birds. We had so little water, we needed to get it here, which is the resting areas and feeding areas for all of those birds. If this happened to be dry and it wasn't as good a hunting for a year, that's just unfortunate.
That's tough, right.
You know, it's hard, we had a lot of unhappy hunters, but if you sit down and you explain to them, look, upstream, look at the river. We're not getting water, we can't make it out of anywhere, you know,
Right.
it's just a drought everywhere. We're doing what we can, we're moving it around, but the final decision always comes to be, it's gotta be for those birds first.
Correct.
So normally, right now, we haven't extended any hunting areas or plan on changing them. The only ones I can think of would be, like I said, those new pieces of land. They've been hunted in the past. That doesn't mean that we will open them when we have them all, but it will definitely be something I'm sure that the management will look at.
Now, I know back east on some of the WMAs, they have back east and they have a lottery
Yep,
for hunters.
yep.
Is that something you guys foresee out here that would ever
I don't-
happen?
I
Or is
don't
it
think
just
so
the
right
area's
now,
so
because we have a
big
pretty
that-
large space and there's so many other wetland areas around here in a kind of a big community. We've got public shooting grounds in Salt Creek north of us, Farmington and Ogden Bay below us. I don't think we would need to do that. I think the swan hunt is done that way right now. That one's run completely by the state. We
Right.
participate in it where they're allowed to hunt on this refuge during the swan hunt. But I believe that's a lottery. You can only get it one year and then you have to try to get a number again
Right.
to get it subsequent years.
Right.
So,
So as far as, like, cause I know that they've got, you have to be there at 4 o'clock in the morning and they draw your name. And if they draw your name, you get a certain blind for half the day. And that's probably just cause it's a smaller,
yeah, a lot of the,
area
yeah, a
with a
lot,
lot of
especially the
hunters.
prairie pothole areas, those
Uh-huh.
wildlife management areas aren't large. There's a lot of them, but they're all pretty small pothole wetlands. So I think that's probably more just to minimize that there aren't too many hunters and to keep it safe. There's not too many harvesting, too many ducks all at once.
right,
We've got a lot of space and a lot of birds, so right now, I don't think that is gonna be an issue.
okay. You guys think of any other questions? Oh, I noticed along the newly paved road out here, you've got a couple different turnoffs. Or I think there's.
Pull-offs
Yeah,
there?
pull-offs,
Yep.
and they've got some signage there.
Yep. So we had, this whole project for the past few years is a federal highways project. Part of it was the Recovery Act, and then another big project that we're just designing with the state to make sure we've got really great access to the refuge. The final plan is all of those kiosks and pull-offs will have interpretive panels about the habitat, the birds, etc. So it's a much more user-friendly for all groups.
okay.
Going around the auto loop, birders, hunter, all information about all of that as you go around along the county road and around the auto loop.
Okay.
So it's just so that it's a lot of money. So basically, you only get so much funded or granted each year, and you kind
Right.
of finish it as you can. But
Right.
yep.
Because that road is nice going
Yeah,
out there
it's
now
really
this
nice.
year.
We've got it's really helped with our cycling community. The cyclists and bikers
Uh-huh.
and stuff are out there all the time.
I've
now.
seen a
They
lot of
love
them
it.
out there.
Yep.
The main loop
Mm-hmm.
around the big body of water,
Yep.
is that ever gonna be paved, or is that
I
gonna
don't
stay a
believe
dirt
so.
road?
I'm pretty sure that, and the reason is mainly for habitat.
Uh-huh.
We would need to widen those dikes, because if we were gonna pave it, we probably would want it to be a 2-lane road, which it's not wide enough to do.
Right.
It's 1 lane. It also has to do with maintenance. Our maintenance staff does way more than half the time to make sure that that road is in good shape and plowing it all the time.
Yeah.
So that would have a lot to do with it. and then just construction of pavement near those pristine wetlands, the amount of silt fence you'd have to use and hope that none of that would run in the road. Any pollutants coming off of a car that drives the auto loop right now soaks a little into that gravel and then dissipates instead of running right off of pavement and into your water, antifreeze and oil and things like that. How you doing?
Are these posters for you over there?
Absolutely. If you want to grab one, these are too. If you like that one.
Okay. Thank you.
So,
Okay. As far as computer technology and stuff, do you
Yep.
have apps that will do a tour as you're driving along?
we don't yet, but those are in our plan. One of the things that we've been working on, especially since I've got here, I'm the coordinator for our new media.
Uh-huh.
We now have a Facebook page about the refuge that a lot of people are using, so check it out.
Just found it.
Cool. We're getting new websites. The whole U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service will be getting new websites soon, so those are going to be a lot more user-friendly than they are now.
Okay.
And there are a lot of cool stuff on them. We are hoping to have a podcast that people can come and either plug into one of our computers up front and get it, or take it right off online and purchase it and put it on their whatever they've got, a little iPhone or iPod, and use it as they go around. We just recently were able to secure the software to be able to make them. It's just going to take some while to write up all the interpretive
Right.
material and then get it recorded, but it's
That'd be-
certainly in the future.
That'd be a pretty
yeah.
neat deal.
Yeah.
So that'll pretty much just be a tour you can watch as you go through the auto tour.
Yeah, you'd hear, yep. It would go through there and there'd probably be numbered posts out there like you've seen on other lands where you're on a trailer and thing. There'd be a spot that it stops and then you push play at that number and you hear instead of having to read or whatever, and it will do that. Or it may be something where it just lets you play and you say stop every so often, and then when you get to blank, turn it back on and
Okay.
listen here as you're driving here. So, yeah, we've got a lot of different ideas. I'd love to get a interactive video screen in that airboat so kids can sit in it and they watch a video screen of what an airboat's like out there on the refuge, because it's what we have to use. So that's,
It brings up another question.
Yep.
How is it possible that we could get a tour?
I would love to
On
say
an
yes,
airboat?
but it's really difficult. Right now, also at this time of the year, it's pretty much too cold. I know it seems really nice today, but the water temperature has to be, the water temperature and the air temperature have to be over 100 degrees, where otherwise everybody else has to wear one of those full orange Mustang jumpsuits if you fell in the water.
Okay, yeah.
And once it gets that cold, we can't give any rides.
Okay.
The only way to do that too is, and the only people that usually give those to is sort of like some of the dignitaries that are like visiting. I think they have given them to some college classes in the past, but you'd have to work that out through our head manager, Bob.
Okay.
And like I said, for this season, they're pretty much done.
Okay.
It's gonna be too cold.
Okay.
But we try to limit those. It's hard to do them because we don't want to do them during breeding season.
Right.
That disturbs the bird.
Right.
So there's this slim time between about July and September where we can do a few of them.
Mhm.
We can't just give them to everybody because then everybody would always want them. And
Right.
it takes a lot of staff time to run them, get out there. It's a long ways down.
A lot of this
Wouldn't
stuff
hurt,
too.
like usually it's, donation for large groups that are gonna, help Fish and Wildlife
Mhm.
with funding or something like that, a grant that get to take those, but it doesn't hurt to, next spring or summer, call over if you've got a class that's, working on it, call
Mhm.
our biologist or our head manager, Bob, and, see what they can do.
Okay. Now back as kind of along the same line with the boats,
Mhm.
because there's the airboats, then there's the mud motor boats. There's certain areas that airboats are allowed only. Is that due to
Yes.
just the noise that the boat puts out, or?
It's a little bit more the depth and the habitat. There's a large area out here
Uh-huh.
that is not very deep. And we do not want a motor hitting that sediment or the plant matter because
Okay.
one of our most important plants is sago pondweed. It's a
Mhm.
floating aquatic plant, big time food for a lot of the waterfowl, and it gets caught in motors. It's not good for your boat in the first place. But second of all, if we tear a lot of those beds up, you're gonna hurt the food, and we just don't wanna do that. So a lot of these areas that are shallow and have that in it, we keep only open to airboats. I'm pretty sure it's only this area that is open to the boats with the mud
Right.
boats.
Right.
And that's because we can keep that. I bet you last year we told people not to take those boats in there. They wouldn't want to anyway. They'd get stuck.
Yeah,
It's
it
dry.
was pretty.
But it was a
pretty
little,
low
it's
last
deeper
year.
this year, so I've seen those boats out there
Yeah.
with no problem.
Right.
Also in the canals, they're usually plenty deep.
Now, how deep are your canals on the
It
average?
depends. On average, I'd say only about 3 to 4 feet. They're not that deep. But
There's a lot of
depending
silt.
on river levels, you know,
Uh-huh.
and if a dam has let a bunch of water out for a few days, some of them can be, you know, 8 to 12 in pockets. But I'd say in general, it's like between 3, 4, and 5, not much. Most of them you could walk across, you wouldn't want to because the mud is really
Mm-hmm.
deep as well, but
I'm a hunter, and
We've been out there.
I venture out there, and I've gotten stuck a couple
Yeah.
times with my feet. But now, as far as water flow going into the refuge,
Mm-hmm.
how many gallons per day, or is that how you measure it?
it's
Or
in
cubic
cubic
feet?
feet, yeah, CFS.
Uh-huh.
And I'm not exactly sure, I'd have to look that up, and it really depends on the day, like I said. Right now, I'm gonna forget who it is, Pacific Corp, one of the corporations up north of us working on energy at one of the dams. It's fluctuating during the day. We'll have way down to 1,000 CFS, up to 2,500 in one 24-hour period. So the river will be really high and then it'll be really low. We had almost 6,000 to 8,000 CFS coming this spring with all that water and
Yeah,
snow coming
a lot
down.
of water.
It was rough. We were lucky. We had such a sort of slow melt this year because of that. We had all of our canal openings always open all spring, which normally we're holding it back to keep it, just to keep that water moving through. So we didn't have any flooded dikes or anything really too bad, which was nice. Yeah, I don't know the total amount that like would go through in a day. I might have to look that up or talk to our biologist. He might know.
Okay.
Actually, our maintenance guys work on a lot of those canal openings, so they probably know. They've also worked here longer than most of the rest of the staff. So, but yeah, it's measured on CFS, and it really just depends on what we're getting from above. A lot less in June through September,
Right.
because we don't have senior rights yet on the water at that time, and it's going to ag. So people are pulling off of the river, so we'll have a lower river, we'll get a lot less water. But come October 1st, we have senior rights, so if we feel we don't have enough, we can tell the folks up there, sorry, we
Right.
can't take it, we need it all.
Right. Anything else you guys
I
can think
don't
of?
think anything have been really helpful, and we appreciate
Yeah,
the time.
that's
My
been
pleasure.
great. That's been great.
What's the
Answered a lot-
class you guys are in?